one of the funny things that happens in crowds, if you've ever been in a crowd running away from police or whatever it is that are shooting at you, being shot at, is people turn away and they run. And so you're running away from the danger, unable to see what's behind you. So you imagine that they're much closer than you think they are. And I began to discover that one of my roles was one of those people that was able to turn around early enough to say, "Isbat, Isbat," which means stop, you're safe, you're safe.
Hello and welcome to Move to Live with me, Akram Khan, brought to you by Marquee TV, the streaming platform that transfers sensational performances from across the arts right onto your screen. I've been dancing all my life and I've never stopped moving. As a dancer, director and choreographer, movement is my first language and the lens through which I understand the world. So I'm really excited to chat with other creatives and explore the role of movement in their life and work. In this podcast, I'm joined by the fantastic actor and producer, Khalid Abdalla, who you may know from the film The Kite Runner, or more recently, his portrayal of Dodi Fayed in the Netflix series The Crown. As well as being a brilliant actor, Khalid is also a passionate political activist who is never afraid to say what he thinks. Hello, Khalid. Thank you so much for coming. Am I saying it right? Khalid.
There's a lot of story already in that, right? Am I Khalid or am I Khalid?
Right.
You know, if you go right to my childhood, first time I went to nursery, I wouldn't tell people my name.
Right.
And my mother asked me why, and I would say, well, because they can't pronounce it.
And so
I became Khalid. And I am Khalid, but I am also Khalid.
Khalid, okay.
But I'm happy with any of the permutations of Khalid and Khalid. The only one I don't like,
Yeah, tell me.
I really don't like, because I have an I in my name, is some people call me Khalid. And Khalid I can't stand. It's wrong for me. But so Khalid, or any of those, you know, because it's a name which exists in many cultures, and so it should have all those pronunciations. But in Egyptian, it's Khalid. The anglicized version is Khalid.
So thank you for being so clear, Khalid.
I broke the mic. Exactly. I leave myself open to that one. I do have friends who tease me and like Khalid, and they'll like write me messages with like long E's.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, you live between two locations, Cairo and London. Where have you found yourself located more at the moment? And what are you missing about the place you're not in?
I'm not sure I live between two places right now. I live in London,
Right.
Really now. My life, my heritage, my background is very much between those two. And Cairo and London are my two cities. They are the two cities that orient who I am. I lived in Cairo predominantly from 2008 to 2016. And since then, I have mostly been, mostly been in London and more been in London. There was a transition. But I am, in my mind, always in both.
Right.
And I always have been in various different ways. That there I would kind of widen it to, you know, what Cairo means to me, or what Egypt means to me, culturally, in a kind of much broader sense. And likewise, my British identity, my London identity, I was born in Glasgow. I wasn't born in London. I had a broad Glaswegian accent till I was 4. And my family came down to London, when I was 4 and a bit. And since then I've, grown up here. But that duality of culture, that duality of political experience, or even not just duality, because that kind of ties it down, multiplicity, plurality is something that I exist in. And I get very restless when I am not just in London, on this side of the world too much. And I also get very restless when I'm on the other side of the world too much. And I would say I carry a constant double vision, which is even more intensified, I'm sure we'll get there, but even more intensified by my revolutionary experience in Egypt.
You do a huge amount of projects, multiple kind of projects, and you're constantly on the move. You do acting, you're a political activist, you research, you're a writer. I want to know, what do you feel at home in as a role, mostly? Or is there a hierarchy of, do you feel at home being an actor, or there's no hierarchy, or it's the same for you?
There are hierarchies at different moments in my life. But for me, a very important transition in my life in relation to this aspect of being and feeling plural. I used to think that the different parts of me were in conflict. The actor in me, the writer in me, the director in me, the producer, the activist, like these things were in conflict. And when I started to really apply the musical metaphor to it and see them more in a kind of symphonic relationship.
Beautiful.
Something in me settled. I am an Arab man, born into this world at this moment. I graduated from university in 2003, the year of the war in Iraq. I enter that world as an actor, and I come from a background, my father and grandfather were both political prisoners. This is the world that I face. And therefore it puts in front of me decisions that I have to make all the time. Some of them, probably none of them comfortable decisions. And that's been a kind of thread that travels through the work that I do. And sometimes that will mean I'm making a film like United 93 about 9/11, or the next one about Afghanistan, the Kite Runner, or the next one about Iraq, or the next one about Egypt. But sometimes it will also mean I'm at the barricades and doing work which is more clearly political. Building an alternative media center, building cultural spaces, being vocal, something that, is closer to a citizen journalist or that kind of thing. And other times it will take me to my work in theatre, or it'll take me to my work as a writer, or it'll take me to, it's that, carrying my identity. And that's not all of me, but carrying my identity in this world, you have questions you have to confront, I feel. And my restlessness is how I confront it. And at the same time, while I do so, I encounter the structural deficits, right? That mean, oh wow, I've got to also be all of these roles, because there aren't that many of us on this side of the world. And on the other side of the world, the other part of my identity, the people doing the kind of work I want to do are in prison sometimes, or in exile of one form or another, or unable to get funding, or unable to make a life for themselves. And so I move between these different places, and it turns out different times. During a revolutionary context in Egypt, it's possible to do the kind of work that I live for. Now it's not. Here, it's possible to do other things. And both those places are important. But as I kind of see it and live it, there is this, larger journey that I am on through my life, and I try to hold on to as much of that in everything that I do. I don't kind of segment and go, okay, now I'm doing this one and it's now this hat and I can ignore all of that. No. As far as I'm concerned, what I do in The Crown is just as political, just as engaged in those issues as, I don't know, The Square or some of those other things. It's different.
Yeah.
But, I discover in playing Dodi, in the context of everything that's going on in the world right now and in Palestine, and, but I discover that Dodi, the character of Dodi Fayed in The Crown, is one of the first in the history of cinema on this side of the world where there's an Arab man who you get to know and love, not fear, and therefore when he dies, mourn him. And I can barely think of any in the history of cinema, right? And what that says about our cultural and political imaginary in the context in which, 30,000 people die and our political leaders are unable to call for a ceasefire. Right? All of these things are deeply, deeply connected, and they meet, for me, in my body. That's why I'm excited to have this conversation.
When you are in a press conference, for example, and when they ask you a question, and they want to know, are you on my side or the other side? How do you confront that? Or is that too personal? You tell me if it's...
No, I mean, it's, again, it's the reason I'm here for this conversation. I enjoy turning the tables, but I also, I think I've developed quite a good radar for understanding if someone is genuinely there to ask me questions, or if they're there to project their ideas of me, or, the ideas they have of me onto me, right? And I understand both perspectives. And my instinct has been to approach both with warmth. I don't expect everyone to understand my cultural heritage. However, at the same time, it can hurt deeply to be under the flattening of that gaze and to have to do the emotional work, to unpick it gently and in a way that isn't accusatory. From my very first red carpet experience, where literally a microphone was put in my face and it was like, how does it feel to play the most hated man in America? I thought a red carpet was just something you walked down and people took photos of you. And then I discovered, no, it's interviews and it's a lot of them, and and I was told someone's going to walk me down the red carpet, and I was like, I can walk. I know how to walk myself. No. And then, and then this. And, I'd done a film, United 93, and I'd thought deeply about it. First thing is that most microphones that went into my, went in my direction presumed I didn't speak English. That was number one. So when they heard this accent, that was already unsettling. But, broadly speaking, I talked about the value of the work. I talked about the fact that you cannot tell the story of what happened on that plane without including the story of the hijackers. And if we're serious about really trying to do the healing work of trauma, then we have to go to those places.
It's very much reminds me of the work that I made for the Roundhouse, at the Roundhouse, called Until the Lions. It's a quote by that Kartik Nair, a writer, presented to me, who got it from a quote from an African proverb that says, "Until the lions have their say, the hunters will always tell the story." And so how will you even begin to empathize if you never hear the viewpoint from the other person, or the other character?
Absolutely. I mean, and also in the context of monstrous acts, right? The easiest way to not ask the questions that have to be asked is to turn the other into a monster. Why do they do it? Well, because they're monsters. Only monstrous people do this. Well, but if they're a human being, then you have serious questions you have to ask. And that is the greatest honor, I think, that one can do to the dead, is, to go to the depth of those questions. And, fundamentally at that moment was, to ask that question, why? And, we're continuing to ask that question, and we're also living in the shadow of what has not been asked still.
A lot of my childhood, I feel, is shaped with my experience with my family, parents, sister, of course, the wider community. Your parents both worked as medical professionals.
You've done your homework.
But you've never felt pushed into that path. I mean, you're not a doctor, as far as I know.
No.
How did they respond to your interest in drama?
Positively. Neither of them... Interestingly, I was interested in being a doctor. They're both amazing doctors. And I really lived seeing how beautiful medicine is, For me, hospitals are healing places. Pediatric ward is where I first met Santa Claus. The nurses would look after me, and when I'd go out and hang out in my father's unit or with my mother, and so I loved hospitals, and I still do.
Sorry, was that in Glasgow or London or different places?
Glasgow was Santa Claus, okay. And then the rest was in London. I was interested in it, and I had that kind of thing, which happens very often with children of immigrants, where I was able to be helped more with the sciences and that kind of thing. So I saw myself as better at the sciences. But then around the age of 14, I started to get as good at the arts subjects. And it was a bit of a surprise.
What arts?
Like English and history. I'd start to be good at it and really enjoy the things that were being set for me. I found it really hard, but I was enjoying it. And then it happened to be around that time that a teacher came up to me one day and said he was doing this play and he thought I'd be good in it. He'd heard me reading in class, and I told him he was mad. And I went to the audition, got the part, and first rehearsal just fell in love with this world. And in that first play, my parents saw it, and I guess they thought I was good. And other people thought I was good. However, go into it with your eyes open, simply, this is how we're seen culturally. Will there be a space for you in the way that in the way that you hope?
Sorry,
and I was colorblind.
Oh, okay.
I was colorblind at school. And in my experience of doing these plays, I was colorblind. I wasn't cast for the fact that I look Arab, right? I was cast for my appropriateness to the kind of quality of the character.
This is in school.
Yeah. But that's not the way it is in the world, And I was kind of aware of that, but I was kind of like, no, it's, it's not going to matter. And I carry on in that in university, while I was at university also, in this sort of colorblind territory, and just enjoying these amazing plays and these amazing characters and getting to test myself and be with other people in the community. But then, as I say, I enter the world as an actor in 2003 in my sort of beginning of a professional. And no, it's a very other, different gaze upon me suddenly. And it's why I didn't see myself in film originally. I thought I was going to be mainly a theatre director. And would act as well. And I would sort of balance between those two. But United 93 took me on a whole other extraordinary journey, which I'm, continuing to kind of reconcile with this plurality that I was talking about. But yeah, no, they have always, my parents have always been in support.
That's incredible. Having, being doctors and not pulling you into that. Well, I only say that's incredible because my father wanted me to be taking over his restaurant, really. I mean, the only reason my father did mention me wanting, him dreaming of me being a doctor, he did mention that once. That was because Bangladeshi, we feel very much that we have to, the children should be put into good use, so when they get ill, it's free. I can take care of them. I'm
feeling that with my kids. I'm like, if my kids turn out not to be, I'll feel unmoored. It's so great to have a parent that you can just call whenever there's a problem, or a family member and stuff. And our house growing up was always this shadow medical ward, really. For the extended family, people who would come who would need treatment and stuff, like they were constantly in and out of the house and flying over and staying with us. And so my parents left Egypt in 1975. My father, as I said, was imprisoned 5 times for his political activity on the left, fighting for social justice and democratic change and these kinds of things. And so that was the circumstance of them leaving. They went to Iraq, and they were there from 1975 to 1978. And during that time, there were bread riots in Egypt, and my father was on a list, which meant had he returned, he probably would have gone straight to prison. So they had to continue out of the country, and they always aimed to go back. And it's that story that eventually takes them first to Ireland and then to Scotland, where I was born. And I don't know if there is some sense in which you sit on an exile of some kind, a future you wish you could have had that you couldn't have had, that you couldn't have. And I don't know. I wonder if that's part of also seeing as part of what I carry as well in trying to live something that in theory is slightly impossible.
I want to ask you, are your parents alive?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And they live in...
They're currently looking after my kids so I can be here.
It's. I feel like the more I interview the wonderful guests like yourself, I think I'm going to do a podcast on the guests' parents.
Yeah.
And then I want to do another one on the podcast of their children.
But this is the thing. And, this is what I learn more and more is we are intergenerational beings.
Yeah.
Massively. A minimum of 5 generations, maybe 7, right? And I think we're very often encouraged to live as if we're in 1.
Yeah.
Maximum 2 or 3, right? And we are, it goes way further back. And certainly if you're aware of the political traumas that have made you, then you start to see those arcs in a bigger way. But even without political traumas, like there are many things that happened to my great-grandfather that affect who what I am today, and it will be the same for my children. Which returns me again to this point that I feel, and it's part of what I feel brings me here at some level, is exploring the space of freedom that exists in our bodies. finding those areas where you were locked, or something you needed to push out, or discover why it's somehow there for you, or all sorts of things. That's a big kind of concern of mine where I am now in my life.
Talking about freedom, especially of movement, I wanted to ask you a question about your childhood, because most people think I found freedom in dance when I was young, and actually it wasn't the case. I found freedom in running away, playing rugby. Yeah, because, they just put me in, right? And when I saw what was happening, you give me the ball, I'll run for my life.
Right.
And I was good at running for my life.
Right.
There was one point in a match I ran home with the ball. I was terrified.
But wait, you found freedom from running away from rugby or from enjoying rugby?
No, I didn't enjoy it.
Right.
Who would enjoy getting battered?
No, because
my size of my body, I was tiny.
Right.
But
I mean, sorry for people who love rugby. I mean, there's nothing against
No, I love rugby, but yeah. But I wanted to ask you about movement and freedom. Like, did you do sports as a child? Or did you find freedom in any sports? Did you dance?
So freedom in movement, the one place where I have always had freedom in movement is the water. For me, it's the water. It's swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on land, I would freeze. And my relationship with dance until relatively recently has been much more freeze, complete rigidity and fear to move or do anything.
Were you never asked to dance in a film, like a ballroom or that?
Well, I mean, more recently that's begun to enter into my life in a big way. And dance has become actually a very important thing for me. No, if you want the truth, I have a big regret about one of the scenes in the Kite Runner, in the wedding, where there's a wedding scene and then there was a possibility to join in the dancing that happens, and I couldn't.
So you didn't dance in that scene?
No. There's no dancing in that scene, and I couldn't. And I was still in a stage in my life where dancing in front of people or dancing was just a complete and utter freeze. And I'm sure there are many people who I'm shy. My mother is an extraordinary dancer, absolutely beautiful dancer. And
meaning you have seen her dance?
Meaning she dances beautiful Arabic dancing,
right.
At least, absolutely, she's wonderful. And she finds such joy in it. And I've come to understand that freeze response, not that everything goes back to politics and stuff, but I have come to understand that freeze response as being something that goes very deep. I find it in lots of other places. When that guy puts the microphone in front of my face, how does it feel to, there's a part of me that has to negotiate that freeze. What do you do? And it exists in all sorts of other cultural spaces where, something is brought up that relates to my identity that is essentially taboo. This difference between inside the house and outside the house, and when friends come, do you feel like you'll be understood? There are many areas where you freeze. And my relationship with the unfreezing, I think in some levels comes to my relationship with theatre and performance and all of those kinds of things. But the water
is where you unfreeze.
The water is, again, it's you talked about that parental relationship. My father is an exceptional swimmer. And he taught both me and my sister. We were both swimming without armbands before we were 3. And the sea particularly the coast of Alexandria, is where, without it, I wouldn't speak Arabic. It was where I would go and spend the summers with my cousins and have the freedom of play and the water, that joy, that movement. And I think there's something lovely about water that's also, you're kind of invisible, especially when you're underwater. Around the age of 20-something, I dislocated my shoulder. I started to get a dislocating shoulder. And so for a long time in my life, I then couldn't swim freely because my shoulder would dislocate. And I happened to go to a doctor who essentially gave me the wrong advice and handled me in a way, he handled my body in a way that made me feel like a piece of meat rather than a person. And, I have parents who are doctors. I know what the difference is. And so for many years, I didn't do the operation on my shoulders. And it left me kind of locked, unable to express what it is, even just what it feels like to have your hand up here in relation to yourself, let alone other people. And doing that operation was one of the best things I've done.
So you've talked to me about the role as that you embody as a political activist. Could you take me back to that physical experience that you've had, in the square in Cairo? Did you take away anything from that experience in the square that was physical, or was it just so overwhelming?
No, I have so many body memories of that time. You're from the first experience of being a body one amongst millions, literally. I've never seen so many people in my life. And just simply what that does to you. Also the effect of tear gas. Which you would think is something, my experience of it, yes, it causes dispersal. But actually because it creates, this thing comes and it produces this response out of you that you haven't willed. It actually produces a lot of anger and what I kind of call a resilience of spirit. Physically, part of my experience of those spaces is also what's extraordinary is it returns the body also to something archetypal. Right? Circles become so important. And how far the voice can go over that space and how that orients how people are in it. But then also this, that was my experience of the first bodies of people killed that I saw. And what it is for the crowd to go to that body and carry them to safety or wherever it may be. And you become also, in a crowd of that size, you become part of a body. As I really feel and describe it, it's especially the day that I'm mainly referencing, but there are many days, but my first experience of it was the 28th of January, which is what we call the Day of Rage, when Tahrir Square was taken and the occupation of it was maintained until Mubarak stepped down. But it was on that day that I, understood, you have the people at the front line who are the ones who are really able to battle and dodge bullets, and that's where they find themselves. That is where their body is. And as I'm mentioning that, I'm remembering this guy who's just, I don't know, he was superhuman. I don't know what he was able to do. He was just able to stand there as this symbol kind of saying, the fact that I stand here means you can. Right? And people are inhumanly able to deal with tear gas and stuff. And then one of the funny things that happens in crowds, if you've ever been in a crowd running away from police or whatever it is that are shooting at you, being shot at, is people turn away and they run. And so you're running away from the danger, unable to see what's behind you. So you imagine that they're much closer than you think they are. And I began to discover that one of my roles was one of those people that was able to turn around early enough to say, Isbat, which means stop, you're safe. I wasn't able to be on the front line, but I was able to be close to it. And then there's just this other thing that, like, under those circumstances, under revolutionary circumstances, it's not like literally the ground under your feet, the materials around you, they no longer become static. They become something that you can use. A rock, the ground becomes a place from which people dig up rocks. The other, like metal, but you turn the fences into percussion to beat the war drum. All sorts of things, they completely change their function. And at the same time as they do, you do. I was actually, the day that it started, which was the 25th of January, I was in London. I'd been in Egypt making this film in the last days of the city that took us 2.5 years to shoot and 10 years to make. But we finished shooting it 6 weeks before the revolution started. And I was like, 2.5 years. Now it's time to be in London a bit. Right? Then the revolution starts and my body is just, needs to be there. And cutting a long story short, I book my flight as soon as I can, and I'm there for that day, the 28th of January, that completely changed everything.
When you were there, did you observe a difference between people who move in hope and people who move without it?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I would answer that question really by going back to before it and now. I mean, revolutionary circumstances don't come out of nowhere, right? And as I describe it, like, stability holds when you kind of go, well, my life might not be great, but my children's life will be better, and so I can put up with this. But when you know that your children's life and their children's life and probably their grandchildren's life are going to be worse than this unlivable life you're living, then things start to feel like revolutionary. Something revolutionary is in the air, and the toll it takes to live that unlivable. There's a phrase that is rife amongst the poor. Haishin Meitin, we're the living dead. Where that enters the eyes, where that enters the body, where that enters relations, where that enters trust, where that enters as a beggar, what you're willing to do to your body in order to be able to survive for the rest of your life and have it as a profession. I remember, it's a funny thing which relates to that. This might seem a bit abstract, but when I first came back in 2016 and we had our kids, we had our first child, and we had a buggy. And, I'm used to the streets in Cairo been living there essentially, and there's no pavement, and everything's like, in places there are pavement, but in general it's like
not fit for a buggy.
Not fit for a buggy. And not fit for someone who needs a wheelchair. Right? And, we're out there and we're on the pavement, and then there's this place where there are these roadworks, and there's this metal square that has a rounded edge. That has a rounded edge, and I stand there and I'm like, this is why we, this is at some level what we're fighting for. And the effect of something so small. Or I remember one time when I came back, my father had a liver transplant in the midst of the revolution in King's College Hospital here in London. And I walk into the NHS and I see these bodies of all these backgrounds walking into this amazing place, and where the floor has been thought of because of, what it's going to have to carry, and the doors that open automatically, and the signs that are on the wall that in case you're feeling tired, call this number, and all of these things. And I'm like, that's exactly why we're on the street. And, I immediately know that face, let alone that body. As I say, I can't unsee it when I'm here, I mean, there's even this thing that I don't know if if you have the same thing when you go to Bangladesh, but like I have friends who are like me, from whatever they're, part British or part you live in Canada or whatever it is, and there's this thing when you arrive, you're still somehow carrying the freshness in your clothes or there's something that's. You can just sense it immediately.
You mean when you go from here to...
When you go from London to Cairo, or, and it's just like... But
for me, it was arrogance. I was convinced I was superior. It's in my show, 0 Degrees, the one I made with Nitin Sawhney and Sidhi Larbisheko and Anthony Gormley. We did a piece together, and the story is that I went with arrogance, and that was my experience. I went because my passport was a different color to the Bangladeshis, and I was brought up to believe that Bangladesh is a third world country. And so I looked at it through those lens, through the colonial lens. And I remember a girl just said to me, one of my cousins, she said to me, you believe you're above me, right? And I said, no, not at all. He says, you don't have to say it. Your body says everything. I feel it. I can feel it. And I said, no, I haven't said it. I said, you don't have to. She said, you don't have to say it. You speak volumes without speaking. And I couldn't sleep for months. And I came back and I couldn't sleep for months. And I was just like, what does she mean? What does she mean? I don't get it. And then I started to slowly deconstruct many years later, many years later, what she meant. But it was the beginning of the untangling of the way I saw Bangladesh. I saw it through predominantly a white male gaze. The victor. And I had a lot of undoing to do.
Yeah.
In all the trauma and experience that you're having, especially now that we've spoken and you have children and I have children, I'm finding it difficult to find, this is the final question, I'm finding it difficult to navigate optimism when my children ask me. What do I say when somebody asks me about the war? Whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in Russia and Ukraine. How do you navigate optimism?
I think there's two things. I think there's what the children understand now.
Wow.
And what they will understand later that they understand about now that is already in there, And I'm not sure, you exactly, actually, I'm not sure that they would take it from my words. I think they take it from my body, And the optimism might actually be in my weeping. because I am feeling. And I am doing my best to be honest about it. And I'm trying to do something about it. One of my first memories is of being on my father's shoulders in a protest for Palestine in Glasgow. And I remember what it meant to be on his shoulders. I remember that. I don't remember the words that came around all of that. I remember what that meant. And I remember what it means. And I see that from the journey from my grandfather to my father, and in these legacies of what it means to try and fight for a better world. But I also see that, in the stories that exist in my grandmother's body, they were, there's so many things that come into it, but it's that family space that holds a sense that we're actually fighting for something.
Mm.
And it's worth fighting for. And that doesn't mean that it's always in big gestures, and it doesn't mean that it's always it's actually sometimes in keeping safe enough to be able to keep going. It's in stamina, it's in food, it's in joy, it's in laughter, it's in survival, it's in communion. We have to believe in that. And our children are called Nawar and Aya. Nawar means one who brings light. Aya, as well as having the religious connotation in relation to the verses in the Quran, but I translate it, and for that reason, as a sign of the miraculous. Nawar was born in 2016, which was a very dark year in many people's experience. Counter-revolution in Egypt, Brexit, Trump coming to power. It was one hell of a dark moment globally, and this rise of right-wing fascism that we've seen around the world. Nawar, one who brings light. And which is not to lay that burden on him. It is just simply what I see when I see any child.
Regardless of colour.
Regardless
creed,
of colour, background, religion, all of it. That gesture of hope, and what you see in them, and what you feel in them when you hold them, and what that kind of promise is. And we're all born into a world that is already in motion in ways that we come to understand much later. But it's that promise that somehow holds out the hope. I believe that the spaces of liberation exist in the smallest, most intimate of places, as well as on the largest kind of canvases and stages.
Thank you so much. It's been such a privilege.
Well, the privilege is mine. It's been an honour to come and speak to you, with you, and to feel your presence in a room, and also what it brings out. It's it's very special. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalid. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Move to Live, and do keep an eye out for more episodes here on Marquee TV. And feel free to get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. The email address is movetolivepodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch on our socials. You'll find all the links in the show notes. So until the next time, goodbye, and please, always keep moving.